Okay, so today we're here to talk about continuous testing with remote execution. We're really talking about how do we run our test automation at scale within enterprises. Okay, so for today's agenda, first I want to introduce you all to Worksoft's connective automation, which is the larger platform in which we do the in which we are doing continuous testing. That's the context for our continuous testing. To make sure that we start at the right place, going to talk a little bit about how we identify the right targets for automation so we can see our best ROI. And then we're really going to get into the heart of the matter, which is our codeless continuous test automation and our new continuous testing manager. Finally, talk about how we can use that throughout your entire development lifecycle, and then we'll get into a demo for the new piece that we just released. So just a little bit about Worksoft. We have been servicing our Fortune 500 customers for well over 20 years, right? So we have a great depth and breadth of knowledge when it comes to business process test automation. We've been doing it for a very long time, and we are recognized in the industry as a leader in this space, right? And over the 20 plus years, I think we're going on 23 at this point, we have delivered a lot of value for our customers, right? So this is not just us saying what we've done. We have proven results and a long-term track record of delivering good ROI, better, faster delivery, and better outcomes for our customers. As I said, we've been in the business of test automation for over 20 years. And in the past few years, we have leveraged our expertise and our insight. And, we're trying to broaden the overall value prop. And that's when we want to talk about what we can call the connective automation platform, right? So in order to really see maximal ROI, with an automation project, you really kind of need to, start at the beginning, which is having insights into your processes themselves. How do we pick the right targets? And so within the connective automation platform, we start with process intelligence, and we use a combination of process discovery, process mining, and process captures to help organizations identify those targets for automation, those targets for optimization, right? So we really start with good intelligence as to what's going to lead to ROI. Way too many times I see automation projects that really are sort of a aim, ready, fire. And process intelligence is how we really do this right and look at sort of we're ready, we're ready, aim, fire. So we start from an intelligence standpoint, automate what we need to, and then we carry that forward all the way into production. But, for today, I want to kind of focus on that central pillar, right, which is, our continuous testing and automated testing. So, within Worksoft, with our core testing, we have a codeless and scalable test automation platform. So it takes very little time to get started and see your initial value with your first automation steps. We can capture and create these tests way faster than just about anyone else in the industry. We're also then able to execute them in an automated fashion much, much faster than any human could do, leading to a great ROI for your automation projects. And, finally, it's codeless. So we are able to create these tests and create that automation without requiring dedicated IT resources. We actually just capture what business users are doing and roll that into our test automation suite. So that really reduces the front-loaded cost of getting automation started, and minimizes the kind of staff and the training costs that are associated with getting business users and IT and testers together to both understand what are the business processes that we're trying to accomplish, and then how do we embody that as a set of tests. Right, so once we've created our set of automation and we can do the basic functional and unit tests as well as regression, that runs into the second part, which is how do we test at scale? It's great to know something works when we have 4 or 5 customers, or doing 4 or 5 test runs, but we're typically serving thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even millions of processes a day. And so with our continuous testing manager, which is the new component that we are releasing to increase our capabilities for parallel execution and testing at scale. This is how you take those same tests you were using for unit, functional, and regression, and then be able to do these tests at scale, as well as run them at the times that are convenient, right? So we can schedule these tests to be run when, in the middle of the night when we're going to have the least impact on our systems, and not have to chew up any of our people's seats, right? We can just run those in the background, run them in parallel in order to shorten our test cycles, and run as many of them as we want, as well as control the timing and put it right where we want to go. So for our existing customers, you know that we have been doing this for years. This was with a component we called our execution manager. We were already best of breed in terms of how we did lights out testing, but we're not the kind of company to sit back and rest on our laurels. We wanted to continue to push that curve. So we have updated that component with a new modern web-based component called Continuous Testing Manager for your lights out testing. So one of the issues that we have kind of addressed is, making it easier to deploy at scale. So we have created an easier way to install your agents and your servers and get everything up and running. So your time from deciding to start a automation project to being able to implement is shrunk, and you're able to get started more quickly and readily. The architecture is now an inside out, so the agent communicates outwards. And in today's secure data center, cloud, and hybrid environments, this enables you to deploy as many agents as you need and lowers those barriers to getting those agents deployed. There's not going to be any more discussions with the network security team and getting to a lot of concerns. These communications typically go out over ports 80 and 443, which for most organizations are just an easy port to open. So we're trying to make it easier for our customers to ramp up their testing at any scale that they desire and in any type of environment that they desire. In addition to, so once we've gotten it out there, we want it to be easy for you to manage, and you'll see some of that when we get into the demo later, right? So we have centralized management for your lights out test execution. Another trend that we see in the industry is security is getting to be a bigger part of compliance and regulatory regimes and consuming a lot more of mind share. And what we typically think of those high security concerns as being more important in production than when we talk about test or QA, that is changing. The industry is moving towards where our test information and our test environments need to be nearly as secure as our actual production environments. So in order to be able to meet those types of requirements that we see the industry moving towards, we have now created much more enhanced user-based permissions within Continuous Testing Manager, giving you more granular control over who can do what, even in our QA environment. And finally, when things go wrong, you need to be able to address those quickly and find the root cause. So based on the experience we have for several years with our execution manager, we've created a more robust set of error reporting that really lets you quickly identify the root cause of any issue. Is it a bad test? Is it a bad test environment? Again, to be able to accelerate remediation of any issues that happen in your environment, whether they be based upon your CICD pipeline or the application itself. And speaking of CI/CD pipelines, as we look at modern DevOps environments, that ability to be a full portion of any CI/CD pipeline is becoming more and more important for maintaining quick, fast, and agile releases to your customer base. So Continuous Testing Manager, which I affectionately call CTM, was built API first. Every single thing that can be done within the server can be done via an API call. And, you're not just on your own to figure out how to execute a set of APIs. We also build CI/CD plugins for many of the common platforms out there, such as Jenkins and ADO. All right, so one of the things I do also want to talk about, we always talk about our CI/CD pipeline as a virtuous cycle. We release some code, we test it, we develop code, we test it, we release it, we take feedback, we develop new code, we test it, we release it, and it sounds like a beautiful cycle. But one of the major challenges I think we've all run into is as you update the code, your sets of regression tests, your sets of tests, and others need to be redeveloped, right? So it's not only front loaded, there's a continuous maintenance cost generally involved with maintaining your CI/CD pipeline. Particularly when we're talking about GUI and UI type of testing, the tests that we have are oftentimes fragile to very minor changes in an end user's experience, right? We change a radio button to a checkbox, or there's now one new option available in a pull down. So we have been pioneers for years in the space of self-healing automation. Right, so this is that ability to continue to reuse those tests, even in the event that there are minor changes that ultimately a human may not really be all that sensitive to, but typical ways of doing testing using XPath or these kind of explicit object recognitions are extremely fragile and then end up needing fixes and tweaks along the way. So that's where we had developed what we call our object action framework. Right, and we continue, just as we're continuing to make improvements in our ability to do lights out and scheduled testing, we also continue to do advancements in the object action framework. And ultimately what you can think of is your typical test tools when they go for validation and others, they're really looking at, say, the DOM or the actual objects that make up a UI. We create an abstraction layer that sort of abstracts the code-based structure and really looks at it from an end user's perspective, right? So we use very advanced analytics to be able to understand really what is the end user perceiving, as opposed to just, what are the objects that are here, and building our tests, based upon sort of that end user experience rather than explicitly on the underlying framework. What that really leads to is when there's a minor change to your test, you're not throwing away that investment you made in creating those automations. We get to keep that, we get to reuse it, and as we move forward into our next testing cycle, those small changes don't mean we need to spend more time or more money in our automation. We can just sit back and keep collecting on that ROI from our initial investment. And I, for one, love doing something once and continuing to see it pay off for me time and time again, iteration after iteration. And so when we talk about testing parallel and at scale, just remember, underlying all of that, we have these wonderful techniques that help you maximize that investment that you've made in automation and just continue using it instead of kind of running it once and then fixing it every iteration. We let the machines fix themselves, for those subsequent small iterations. So want to provide just a little more context, in terms of where this also fits in with our entire platform. And so I think a lot of us have all heard of shift left, right? This is something that we talk about detecting defects earlier in the process. Test automation and continuous testing helps us do that by pulling in our test and the ability to test earlier within our process. But we also now want to start talking about shifting right, which is how do we actually leverage the automations that we have done in test and through test automation and utilize those in production. Now, I'm not going to talk about this too extensively today. We have done some other webinars on RPA and production orchestration, but just want to reinforce that the investment you make in continuous testing doesn't just sit in its lone silo. And so we can take those test automation artifacts, and if we take a look at your kind of traditional CI/CD pipeline, and throughout my career, I've done several versions and looked at different ways of what a CI/CD pipeline, but we've all seen a form of this slide. What you haven't probably seen before is what's over here on the far right-hand side. Normally, we just talk, hey, plan, prepare, build, test, deploy, and we cycle on back with this random little blurb go, we get feedback. And so this is what I was talking about within our connective automation platform. We shift right those test automation artifacts and actually use them as a part of production automation with the RPA, robotic process automation portion of our portfolio. So for anybody who is looking to automate their production processes, right, this is a virtuous cycle where we take the artifacts that we tested in QA and actually use those to drive production automation. This saves on time of having to test our automation separate from the product itself, which is traditionally how these things happen. And then there's always a lag time. You can't do your production process automation until your production system is relatively complete. This really shortens that cycle and allows you to take what you have done earlier in your continuous testing automation and squeeze every little bit of value out of that investment into production. And then this really does drive that feedback loop as we go back into plan. All right, but we're here to talk about continuous testing, right? So we're talking about everything that we're doing in the middle, and I'd be awfully remiss if we didn't go in and show you. So let me switch my screen over here. Oops. And here I want to show you guys the new continuous testing manager that we just went GA with last week. So let me go ahead and log in. All right, so first off, when you come into CTM, you can get a view of what has been happening today, as well as historically, to kind of get an idea of the value that your automated tests are driving. So we can see how many we've executed, say in the last 7 days. We can look at the number of tests that we have completed over time, get some nice graphs, and we can look for, when have we had tests fail? You know, obviously there are times we expect tests to fail, see what we've aborted, skipped, and moved along, right? So right off the bat, we get an idea of what we have been doing. And, if we go outside of a demo system, you're going to see these numbers being typically a lot larger for our customers. But this is my little demo system, and that's about what I do as a PM in terms of the number of tests that I'm running. So, how do we get here? So in this scenario, I'm just going to come on in and I am going to create a new suite. And a suite is the collection of processes that we want to run as a complete end-to-end test. And I cannot stress that enough, which is we are not just testing, individual functional processes here. We are, little unit tests or one little piece of functionality. We're enabling the ability to test that entire end-to-end flow for an overall business process. So let's put some tags so I can find these later. And, CTM is going to give your QA folks their nights and weekends back, because instead of having to be up all night and running tests, we're going to be able to go ahead and schedule these and have it happen on when we want it to. All right, so once I've kind of put in it's just some basic information around the suite. I see that I have my databases here with all of our sets of tests, and I'm just going to go ahead and pick a couple here. All right, and if I wanted to, along the line, I could search, if we, amongst all the tests to find something specific, but thankfully I know exactly what I'm looking for, and what a surprise that it's here at the very top. So I've got the tests that I want to run as part of my overall process. And now I can take a look at, where do I want to run it and how do I wish to run it, right? So right off the bat, I can set, do I want to run these tests in parallel or sequential? So if I want to hop over to sequential, I can order them and sequence them. But because I want to show something later in the demo, I'm going to run these two as parallel. We can also define, what to happen when we run into errors, timeouts. And then with machine attributes, here's where we can control what machines we actually run on, right? So there can be different attributes here. And I won't get into all the details, right? But I could say, hey, I want to run things that have a particular host name if I just want to restrict it to one machine, or maybe I want its OS to be, Windows. I would like to type Windows 10. Or something along those lines. So here we can define a set of machines that we want to execute on, so we are, executing the right things. Another common thing might be by department, right? And you can add these attributes as you need to for your environment, right? So it might be, we only want to do finance machines. Again, I think we get the point. And here with the record set, this is where we basically can inject the data that we need to use with the various tests and handle different data scenarios. But that being the case, I don't actually want to do that. So let's go on next. And here's now where I set when I want to run it. So one, I can do a quick one-time fire off sometime in the future. that's not what I'm going to do. We also can do scheduling. So if you want to do the scheduling directly within CTM, we set our start, our end date, or an end after. And then we can also set, various recurrences, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. You really got a lot of flexibility in the way that you can go ahead and set up your schedule for executing your tests. But for this scenario, I want to do this by request. So this will only be fired on demand. And it's important to think about, when you're doing a request on demand, the most common reason you want to do this is you want to plug this particular suite into part of your CI/CD pipeline. So one, if the test is there, or if the suite is there, regardless, you can still make an API call to execute it. But if you don't want to handle that scheduling or let that scheduling be done by your CI/CD pipeline, you can just set it to by request. And now this is an easy suite to execute via API at any time you want. Or alternatively, you can execute it via our plugins. But in any case, this is the easiest way to plug it into a CI/CD pipeline so that it's just a part of your overall environment. All right, so I was talking about how security is a security requirements continuing to increase year over year, and those are showing up earlier and earlier in our SDLC. So here I can go ahead and set up who all I want to have access to this thing, and I think I want myself to have access to it. I want it to be mine. Right, if we need to keep this protected and anything along those lines, I can make it private. Or I can just say, hey, anybody within the organization who has a login, they can go ahead and view as well. And here we have some pretty good granular ideas on who we want to notify in the event of something that goes wrong, right? So if we're looking at, say, a status or failed, right, we might want to go ahead and send that to the business owner for that process. For a CTM or certify error, if there's actually something wrong with the environment, you might say, okay, our Worksoft admin should probably get notified for something like that, right? If it's passed, hey, who knows whether we really want to notify? So we can set up sort of that granular notifications and make sure we're not really clogging up emails or inboxes for people who don't need it. And then we can send everything to me. Actually, I really don't want to get all of those emails, but we can set up exactly who and when we want to notify folks as to what's happened within the system. So I've set up everything I want. Actually, I don't really want to notify anybody. So we will go ahead and finalize that. So I can see my overall, everything that I had defined for the suite. And now I am going to go ahead and run this puppy, right? So I want to run the suite. And now I can come over here and take a look at my executions, and this guy is running. And this is one of the cool things here, right? I can go in and spy on these processes. And in a moment, it's going to pull up the screen, and we can see it going through the various steps that were defined in our tests. They are relatively simple tests and shouldn't take too awful long to come up. Shouldn't take too long to execute. Hopefully mine works. Unless that guy already finished, let me just switch over. Okay, so we can switch between our two machines. Just wanted to show here. That's why I chose in parallel. Okay, so now we're going, and within this case, I can also see what's happening on both of those screens and see as it steps through the various UI steps and things along those lines. So we'll let that complete in the background. As those tests are overall running, I wanted to show a couple of other quick little things that make life a little bit easier. So earlier, I had ostensibly detected an issue and said, hey, wait, I want to go ahead and abort this and stop it. But from there, I can continue, come back and look. Perhaps there was something wrong in the environment. I fired it off at the wrong time. And I have the control to say, oh, do I want to just start that whole suite again? Or in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and rerun those failed tests. All right, so that guy will get started again, and here we are. We can see him, and if we want, we can do the same thing. Come back in, spy. We'll give that a moment. Yeah, we've already seen this, and I want to take the minute for everything to draw. So I just want to show one last little thing. We do manage, we have the management of credentials and other things along those lines. Here are the machines that we have for running, and as I had alluded to before, here's where we can kind of set those various attributes, right? So I can see what versions are running, and this helps me choose what machines I want to run everything against, as well as what are the appropriate credentials and other pieces that we need to use when running our tests. So we've kind of separated out the user and the security from the actual tests themselves. So let's just come back, see if everybody's happy. And that's going to complete in a moment. And don't know if anybody remembered the counts, but yeah, we see that another suite has completed, and these will get updated in a moment. And the number of tests has also been going up, but since we're running multiple tests in a suite, that's why these numbers are larger than others.